Hey everyone, spoilers for The Many Saints of Newark, a Sopranos story. If you haven't seen it, do check it out. It's a cool film. And if you have, enjoy the video. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Script Department. I'm John, I'm joined today by Oisin. We're going to be talking about The Many Saints of Newark, a Sopranos story. But before we get into that, do check out our website if you haven't already. Where you can find all the latest projects that we're working on with our global network of screenwriters. Just check out thescriptdepartment.net. You can also find us on social media, hit the links in the description, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for The Script Department and give the YouTube channel a subscribe as well. Oisin, let's talk about The Many Saints of Newark. First, I'd like to get a sense of where you're coming from with The Sopranos and your interest in The Sopranos. Are you somebody who enjoyed watching the show? I mean, it is a highly acclaimed television show, considered by many to be one of the greatest of all time. Certainly one of the best shows of the early 21st century.
Well, I'm in that many category. I think Sopranos is number one. I think without Sopranos, we wouldn't have had Mad Men. We wouldn't have had a quarter of the quality we have now. I think it broke the mold when it came out in 1999. I think it broke out. And for the 7-8 years we had of it, it was definitely the best TV of my generation, and I still watch it regularly. I once, to tell you where I come from, I once set myself a brief, an assignment. I watched The Sopranos from episode 1 right up to Made in America, and then I watched it from Made in America back to episode 1 just to watch the evolvement of a character and the devolvement of a character and could I see the differences in the characters on screen.
And for audiences listening, what is Made in America?
Made in America is the last episode. Of season 6B, I think, after a writer's strike they came back. So it's the last episode with the controversial ending, cut to black, and relaunched the Don't Stop Believing by Journey and got us all back bopping to that again, and kind of had us screaming at Meadow Soprano trying to parallel park, the final sequence, which David Chase directed. So I watched up until the final episode, Made in America, and then watched the whole way back then again.
You watched all of The Sopranos in reverse.
In reverse, just as an exercise to watch how the characters had evolved, and then just see was the development. Did I feel the same watching the devolvement of the characters?
There's an episode of American Dad, the animation, where the characters watch Breaking Bad backwards for that same reason, and I laughed so hard when I heard that. And now you're telling me you actually did it with The Sopranos. But anyway, fair use.
It was a lull in my career. I had a bit of time. And the kids were all in school, so I needed to do something to fill the hours.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I got The Sopranos. I watched season 1 and 2 of The Sopranos when it came out. I was a teenager, I think, and it was like this really kind of mature show. It was intimidating. It was, Paulie scared the hell out of me. This guy with his tracksuits, and he does this thing with his hands where he point at stuff like this, and he does this in the character playing Paulie in The Many Saints of Newark does it, and I just popped so hard for it because it was like I remembered. I was like, you don't even need to know the guy's name, that's Paulie. They all have these very elaborate kind of personas and they're very over the top kind of performances. They're all chewing the scenery in the best possible way in The Many Saints of Newark, but you knew that's Paulie right there. And I Paulie scared the hell out of me when I was a teenager watching The Sopranos and some of the other characters as well. But I revisited The Sopranos. I bought the box set, I think in like maybe 2009, 2010. And I went through the whole thing. It took me a while to get through it. I didn't watch an episode every day. I watched maybe an episode every... I think I would watch maybe 2 or 3 episodes over a weekend. And then, I needed a break after that because I did find it a little bit of a a heavy show to get through.
Mm.
Not because it's a bad show or anything like that, but I didn't find it to be an addictive show. And I'm somebody who really loves gangster movies. I love a great uh, gangster torture sequence in a movie where they're like threatening somebody or whatever. I love a great interrogation, or a great kind of case to kind of bring down the gangsters, to bring down the family. And one of the things I love about The Sopranos was the kind of the FBI connection. Am I right? Was it FBI? Was it the FBI, or
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just
yeah,
some
yeah.
police
No,
involvement?
the FBI start investigating late in season 1. Yeah.
Yeah, I always found that really enjoyable, kind of those kind of moments where you'd see the pictures tacked on the board and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Anytime you see the hierarchy of a crime family in a movie or a show, like that always puts a smile on my face. So, really enjoyed it, I have to say, but it was I think I maybe took longer than I would have maybe with The Wire, for example, which I became very
I
addicted to.
Yeah, I think it was a case of you were either like Oasis and Blur in the Britpop, you were either The Wire, Sopranos, and I
Yeah,
was more Sopranos. Not
I
to say that I didn't enjoy The Wire when I watched it, I just found Sopranos just took me more.
The Wire is another episode we need to do. But yeah, no. So this is one of those things where, coming into this movie, I was really excited about this,
Mhm.
but I didn't think I would be that excited. Like the trailer kind of crept up on me. I watched the trailer. I thought, wow, this looks good. And then the music hits. I woke up this morning.
First
Hits.
couple of beats,
Yeah, the
yeah,
first beats at
yeah,
the end of the trailer, and I thought,
yeah.
wow, I am all in for
Here we
this.
go. Here we
Take
go.
my
Yeah.
take my money. Whatever it takes, I'm going to subscribe to any platform to get my hands on this show.
Mhm.
And I say show because I thought this was a TV show. And I went on IMDb to find out how many episodes are they doing with this.
Mhm.
Is it a limited series? Is it because it couldn't possibly be a movie, right?
Yeah.
And then I was bummed out when I found out it was a movie. Now, that isn't to say I didn't enjoy the movie, by the way, but just
Mhm.
going into this movie, I thought, God, I wish this was a show.
Well, I think when we go into our deep dive later on, I think I agree with you on that point. I think that it took them 6 seasons to build up the Sopranos that we know and love, and they're trying to do the same over 2 hours in this. And as we
Mm,
get into the deep dive, I don't think they got there. And I think if they even had a limited 6 by 1 hour, we would have got a lot more from it. But
mm.
again, that's as a fan, that's reaching for more content. I enjoyed the movie, but I think I'll have to leave it at that. I just enjoyed it. You know.
Uh, yeah, I mean, my general observation of my general kind of experience watching the film was very positive. I had so much fun with it. As somebody who now is very, very, Italian culture is a big part of my life now. Um, and that show just really tickled me with the way that the way they said certain things. The way I always love when,
There's a moment when he says sausage, which I thought was brilliant.
yeah. There's loads of great moments where you think, it almost, yeah, it was just such a great, yeah, the Italian American kind of connection, but it's that kind of obsessive longing to kind of go back, to the old country, or
Yeah,
there's always that component in The Sopranos, I think, that, or in Goodfellas, and a lot of
yeah.
those kind of Scorsese-esque
Mhm.
type of approaches to gangster stories. And I think Sopranos very much, Scorsese has his fingerprints all over that show without ever having
Mhm.
touched it.
Mhm.
Um, you can definitely feel like, I really enjoyed my time with the movie, but I did spend it took me a few days afterwards to figure out what I had seen and what the significance of it was, because
Mhm.
you can't make a movie that has the subtitle A Soprano Story without then trying to make connections to it afterwards, without trying to
Mhm.
link up these puzzle pieces afterwards. And it took me a little bit longer than maybe it should have for me to square the whole thing in my head.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so let's get into the plot. Let's talk about the story in 3 sections. We'll talk about the first act. We'll then talk about Dickie and his relationship with the love interest of this story, and then we'll explore the third act, because I think the third act is probably the most interesting one to discuss from a kind of a screenwriting point of view and a kind of a filmmaking, television production kind of point of view. Um, so the first act, uh, walk us through everything up until the kind of climax of Act One.
Okay, so we're introduced to the story by Chris Moltisanti, and Chris Moltisanti is voiced by Michael Imperioli. And for those who have seen the show, Chris Moltisanti was I suppose, an associate. He was a maid guy in Tony Soprano's gang, and he's narrating this story for us. And he introduces us to his father, Dickie Moltisanti, who we see walking through a crowded ferry port on the way to meet his own father with a young Tony Soprano. And his father's name is also Dick, but he's known as Hollywood Dick. And he's coming back from Italy, or the old country, with his new wife, Giuseppina. And it's instant. There's an instant attraction there between both Giuseppina and Dickie. And they're just the next couple of scenes are setting up their family lives, where Dick is married to a good Italian American woman who stays at home, does all the cooking. Giuseppina is that new Western looking, everything's better in America, I don't want to have the 10 children back in Italy. She states that later in the movie. I want to, don't wear that big black dress, I want to live. She came to America for a better life for herself. So then we meet Dickie's gang at I think it's at Janice Soprano's christening. We meet Pussy Bump and Sarah, we meet Polly, we meet Silvio, we meet Johnny Soprano and Junior Soprano. We meet the core cast that we're meeting, and Dickie showing off his new wife. She's much younger than him, and he's really kind of, I suppose, he's really living up the fact that he has a much younger, much more attractive wife than a lot of the guys have here. So then we meet Dickie's other business partner as Harold, and he's kind of I suppose he's kind of a bit of an enforcer for him, and he's a collector for him, and they've been ripped off by another gang, I suppose, a fledgling gang starting in Newark, and they put the beat down on a young kid and take the money back from him. And the next thing we see of note is we're back in the porkhouse of Satriales, where Harold comes in to explain that he's been robbed again by this young kid, and Dickie Moltisanti says, well, look, do you not feel a bit ashamed about that, putting in motion this young kid's assassination, which then puts Harold on the run and has to get away from Newark, away from Dickie. Then we see that Hollywood Dick and Giuseppina's marriage isn't exactly what Giuseppina thought it was going to be. I think Hollywood Dick just wanted a new kind of woman to give him more children. She wanted a new life in America with this American gentleman. Didn't work out that way, and they have an altercation. He kicks her down the stairs, and then she's realized he's not much better than what I've left or what I ran away from in Italy. Then there's a moment where Giuseppina acts in the attraction to Dickie, and she kisses him, and he's concerned about his wife and that kind of stuff. Will she see what's going to happen here? You're my stepmom. So he agrees to speak to Dick Moltisanti, or his father, Dickie, and they have a chat, and they have an argument in the car, and through accident more than premeditation, Hollywood Dick gets killed, and Dickie has to hide all this, and so he drives him across town during the Newark riots. A really comical scene where it kind of reminded me strangely of Jurassic Park. All these people are running away and they don't know what they're running away from. They're hopping off the car, and next this, I think it's the National Guard tank, comes around the corner, and they stop, and they see Dickie driving the car with his dead father's body slumped on the dashboard. And I assume they just think that he's drunk, and they just wave him through. So he brings him to a business that he's had, and he makes it look like it was destroyed in the riots. After killing his father, he has to go and meet his uncle, played by the same character plays Hollywood Dick. They're twin brothers. So Ray Liotta plays the two roles. And in the prison, he tells Sally that his brother has died. Explains how it has, explains his cover story, and that gets Salvatore thinking there's not everything is all right here with Dickie, because if I know my brother, he wouldn't have done half the stuff that he's being told to do, or that I'm being told he has done. So that's
So
kind of where we are to get to, I suppose, the end of the first act, and the incident that drives the rest of the story, and is the murder of Hollywood Dick.
and then the second act then is really exploring I suppose we move out of the Vietnam War, we move into the 70s more, and then we're seeing Michael Gandolfini, James Gandolfini's son, playing Tony Soprano. We're seeing him, he's got a promising football career if he plays his cards right. The teachers and the counselors in school are trying to get him to kind of toe the line a little bit, and trying to get Livia, the mother, more involved, and she's just brilliantly, I think. Well, she's just writing off her son's future, faster than she should. And then by the time we get to, I guess, the end of Act 2, Dickie and Jessipina's relationship has broken down, and Tony's relationship with Dickie has kind of developed into something of he's almost like an obsessive fan of his uncle at this point. He really he really wants his uncle's, I guess. I don't know, how would you describe it? He wants his...
It's almost like a one-sided infatuation.
Yeah, it's infatuation. That's the word.
He sees his uncle's lifestyle, and he's not sure he wants it, but he's in awe of it, and he's in awe of the respect people have for. I think he wants the respect people have for his uncle rather than how he's got it.
You see, the reason why I'm struggling, if it sounds like I'm struggling to piece together the puzzle of Act 2, it's because I don't remember much of it. It's a very skeletal, shallow kind of exploration of character, I found.
The way I felt when I watched it was I could have walked away from it at any time, got a cup of tea, actually boiled the kettle, let it boil, fill it up, and come back to it, and I wouldn't have missed a whole lot of character development or story. I felt it meandered through, picking off moments from the TV series that they were able to slot in here to progress the story. But it didn't progress Dickie's story, which is what I feel this movie is about.
Yeah, it is definitely Dickie's movie. But I think by the time you get into the third act, so Dickie finds out that Jessipina, who he's now having a full-on relationship with, has been sleeping with Harold, who's now become his nemesis in this story. This breaks his heart, and he ends up murdering her, drowning her in the sea. And then I think by the time we get into Act 3, he's just a very, I don't know, he's like a shell of himself.
He's not even a fully formed character by Act 3. He's a sketch of what he was in Act 1, where we saw a fully rounded character. Whereas by Act 3, I just felt, again, probably because I knew where this story was going to go, I was waiting for the inevitable. And I actually felt like I wasn't too concerned when it happened or how it happened.
The inevitable here is that he gets killed.
He gets killed. Yeah. And I just felt like there was no redeemable character about him for me to feel like, okay, I know he's going to get killed, and I should feel sad about it because he is the anti-hero in a way of this movie. But I didn't feel any attraction to the character, any sympathy, any empathy for the character. because of what I just saw him do for 2 hours. And it's not even like it's a lack of empathy like you would have had with a Scorsese movie like Casino
Mm,
or
mm,
Wolf of Wall Street, where you knew these guys were bad guys, but you still were kind of rooting for them,
mm.
even at the very end. Whereas I just felt with this particular movie, I wasn't rooting for him. He wasn't an anti-hero.
He, at that point when he gets whacked, to use their terms, um, he's had a falling out with Tony, who spends ages kind of banging on the door out in the winter cold. I imagine it is freezing in New Jersey at that time of year, and he's standing out in the cold in the middle of the night, banging on the door of the warehouse, trying to get Dickie to open up and talk to him. He can't. Dickie doesn't. Excuse me. Dickie doesn't want anything to do with him. He kind of wants to, but he's like, I need to kind of distance myself from Tony. Why does he want to distance himself from Tony? Because that's something I've forgotten about now.
He's got a warning from Sally, and it's a kind of veiled threat that everybody that you love ends up dead. And what Sally's getting at is either you kill them or they get killed because they know you. So that's why he's keeping Tony's at arm. And at that point, he's fallen out with everyone. He's fallen out. Josephina's now dead. Harold and himself are embroiled in this turf war. He's been warned by Sally to stay away from anyone that he loves, because they're going to get killed in the crossfire. He's fallen out with Junior Soprano because Johnny Boy is now in prison, and Junior's the de facto kind of street boss in a way. And he's had a falling out with him because he fell down the steps and he laughed at him, and he kind of emasculated him in a sense in front of his, I don't know, was it his wife or his girlfriend?
Yeah, his wife.
And
actually, just on the topic of Junior. Junior is somebody we have to mention in this, because it turns out he is the one who ordered the hit on Dickie, which is that something that we know in the Sopranos TV show?
It's not. What we know in the Sopranos TV show is that he was killed by a cop who owed the family money, but it's not said which family member the money is owed to. So that was a nice addition to the information that we had known from the Sopranos TV show.
Is it a question that had been on the minds of Sopranos fans? Because you're a bigger Soprano fan than I am.
Personally, I don't think so. I think what was more in their mind was whether it was a crib or a TV tray, because that was the legend that had grown up around Dickie Moltisanti, was that he was killed coming home with a crib for young Chris. But as we saw, and Tony tells him in the card, no, it was a TV tray, and he just lets Christopher believe what he wants to believe by saying, yeah, okay, it may have been a crib, but he knows full well, as we saw in the movie, that it was a TV tray that he was bringing home, or a TV dinner tray. So that kind of takes away from the romanticism of Dickie from us knowing what Chris wants to believe, But I thought that moment was the immersion of the Junior Soprano that we knew in the series, in that he was kind of like this Machiavellian character in the back, as you would have with most Hyman Roth and Godfather. Most of the mafioso gangster style movies would have a Machiavellian type guy. In this case, it was Junior Soprano, and that carried through into the series for me, because Junior was never the most physically imposing person in the series, which is why I was surprised when I saw Corey Stowe playing, because he's quite a big built man. Whereas, okay, I know we're coming into Junior Soprano 30 years later, probably in his late 60s, early 70s in the series, but he came across as someone who was never physically intimidating. He was always more conniving and always more Machiavellian and more intelligent with how he carried out his actions that he had to carry out. So it was a bit of a stretch for me to see a guy as built as that Junior Soprano.
But the twist itself of Junior as the orchestrator of the killing, did that sit well with you?
As I said, by the time we got to that moment, I didn't really mind what happened to Dickie Moltisanti, because he didn't come across to me as a character that I was.
No, but just in the way that it changes, in the way it changes the way you see Junior now when you watch the TV show. I mean,
Not really, because having watched so many gangster movies, and there's always that everyone knows someone has done something, but no one
Mm,
quite knows who it was. So
okay.
even though he's there with the son of the man he shot, Tony is also there with sons of men he shot or men he's ordered to be killed, and they
Mm,
still shake hands and kiss, and they realize this thing has to be done. It's causing out. It's our thing, you know.
mm.
They're men of honor, and they have to do whatever they have to do to keep the honor going.
But it was, yeah, it was. There are 2 points in the movie where that kind of, I mean, if Junior ordering a hit on Dickie is the climax of Junior's arc in that movie, or his thread in that movie, the other two kind of points in that are he's he slips later in the movie and injures his back and gets made fun of and embarrassed in front of everyone. The kind of, I think the real, that's the straw that broke the camel's back, no pun intended. But it's like this. I think for me the big one was they're all winding him up in the bar about the fact that they think they saw his wife with another man or his girlfriend with another man or something like that. And it's like, like, what kind of man are you? These guys say they saw your wife with another man and you're just sitting here laughing. Like, you should be
Yeah,
out there, and they're kind of winding him up. And it's really, I felt bad for him in that moment. I was like, oh man, that's, that feels uncomfortable. It feels awkward. It feels like, I think we've all been there in that kind of situation where somebody's winding us up a little bit, somebody's kind of poking us, and you're just getting you're feeling like you can feel, your blood boiling a little bit, but you can't do anything. And I thought that was a very cool little moment.
yeah, I know the moment you're referring to. That's quite early in the second
Mm,
act when they're all in the club with their girlfriends. It's the girlfriend night rather than the wife night, and but that happens so often through the series that you almost forget about it. It's almost like
mm,
Junior Soprano's used to that. The moment that I felt was more powerful was Johnny had gone to jail. Tony had just done something in school. He started a numbers game or something. He started something illegal in school, and Junior came around to talk to him. And
mm,
Olivia said,
mm,
"No, whenever you talk to him, he gets wound up. Let Dickie talk to him." Now,
mm.
Dickie was not blood to these. He was true marriage. He wasn't blood to these people. And so, for his uncle to be told by his sister-in-law to leave your nephew alone and let this stranger, in terms of family, to come through and do it, I think that was even more of an attack on his manhood than being told we saw your wife. Because you would imagine in that time amongst those people, that kind of locker room talk, for lack of a better
Mm,
word, would have been right amongst them. So it's probably something he would laugh off. And he would probably been
mm.
saying it with someone else then the following week. So he probably took a more of a slight coming from a younger guy than when he would take some from his peers. But I think the moment where he was ostracized from Tony's life to give advice probably hurt them more than that kind of ribbing in a nightclub.
There is one other scene, which is he's bringing Junior is bringing Johnny back from prison. He's just got out of prison. He's driving him home, and
Mm.
they're driving through the neighborhood, and they see that a black family has moved in to the neighborhood, to what would have been a probably an all white neighborhood. And Johnny just loses his mind over this. He just gives these deeply racist, offensive remarks about, the community's changing and all that, and he just
Yeah.
it's really ugly.
And it's,
And
it's it's all in one line as well. It's just on our
yeah,
street,
yeah,
you know?
and it's blame. He's just seething with rage about this, and he's blaming Junior for not taking care or stepping up or running things properly or whatever, as if he can control any of that. um and it's just this kind of irrational kind of abuse being hurled at Junior, but he's comparing him to Dickie. He's saying, why, well, Dickie stepped up when his father died, so when I went into the can, why didn't you should have stepped up,
Mm.
and all that. And it's, you feel so, again, Junior I think is a very, uh you can empathize with the kind of, the in a weird way. I mean, none of these people are likable people at the end of the
No,
day,
no.
but
But
if we're
yeah,
forced to align ourselves with people in this movie, you can see yourself gravitating toward and feeling bad for this guy because of the way he's positioned in this family.
in the world we're watching, he's probably the most empathetic character,
Mm,
because
mm,
there's a moment as well. I know we're jumping back and forward, but that's as it comes back to me in terms of memory. Uh, at Hollywood Dick's funeral, there's a moment where Dickie says, "I wish I had a brother." And at this point,
mm,
Johnny Boy's in prison as well. And Junior says, "Well, I'm your brother now." And that comes before the scene, I think, where they're kind of riling each other up in the nightclub. And that's kind of like, I thought we brothers wouldn't do this to one another, or and then later, as it goes on, the accusation from Johnny about the family moving in, and then Olivia saying, "No, leave him alone, leave Dickie talk to him, you always get him worked up." That's coming from someone who he said was his brother. You would imagine in that kind of family that, Dickie would have said, "No, actually, I'm just a cousin or whatever. Let Junior do it." But
mm.
the fact
Yeah,
that
yeah,
he
yeah.
didn't do it, that hurt Junior even more, because he's called this guy's brother, but yeah, he's looking down on him every chance he gets, laughing in his face
Mm.
at that point. You know,
I do think Junior, there's that really funny scene as well where he's trying to have sex with his wife or his girlfriend or whoever, and he just can't. He's got all this kind of this brace around his back and his stomach and everything because of the injury, and he's just okay. Let's try this position. Oh no, that hurts too much. Let's try, and he's just complaining the whole time. And then I'm assuming it's his wife, says, "Any excuse not to fuck, eh, Junior?" It's just so funny. It's so just kind of, you just think, well, now we've just set Junior up for 30
but
years of ribbing and for the rest of the.
maybe I'm reading too much into this, but there's a nice bit of visual storytelling there where he smashes a saint against the wall, which
Yes.
Multisanti, saint, I don't know what saint
Yeah.
it was, but he just picked up a holy relic or holy statue, threw
Mm.
it across the room, and you're kind of thinking, okay, that's foreshadowing that he's going to crush Dickie.
It's funny.
You
David
know,
Chase David Chase. I think he's like Martin Scorsese's twin brother or genetic clone or son from another. I don't know. He's he like, there's that moment at the end of The Departed, which is the rat walking along the roof, and everybody just goes, "I get it. It's so on the nose, and but David Chase is so guilty of doing that as well in movies or in his work. There's always these moments that are so on the nose that you just laugh at them afterwards. I didn't pick up on that until you said it to me. And then I'm like, of course he did that, because this is the guy who basically took the entire cast list of Goodfellas and put them in his TV show. And now he's done that further with Ray Liotta in in Many Saints of
well,
Newark.
there was we discussed this earlier. I sent you a message saying I love the in joke where we have Little Joey sings while Ray Liotta's looking at the album in the prison.
Yeah,
It's Goodfellas. It's Henry Hilla's look at Tommy DeSimone's
yeah.
album in prison. So yeah, but
No, but I remember. Sorry, just I remember watching The Sopranos because Goodfellas has always been, ever since I think I saw Goodfellas when I was like 13 or something first, and it blew my mind. I mean, how good that film was. And there was this wonderful introduction on TCM, Turner Classic Movies, from Stephen Fry about the film. And I watched it and I just said, okay, I have to watch this film, obviously. And it blew my mind. And then that got me into gangster movies from then on. And I watched The Sopranos, and I just was like, but that's the guy, Paulie. He was in Goodfellas, and that guy was in Goodfellas, and there's Lorraine Bracco, is it? She was in
Bracco,
Goodfellas, and I'm
yeah.
like, everybody's here except Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, and De Niro. And now I'm watching The Many Saints of Newark, and Ray Liotta's there. So all we need now is one movie or TV show where we get a cameo from Joe Pesci and De Niro, and we literally have the Goodfellas fan movie, or the Goodfellas reunion complete. It's
But I mean, it's been mentioned many times, but even the Goodfellas references throughout The Sopranos,
yeah,
like
yeah,
Christopher Moltisanti goes in to get pastries and shoots the guy in the foot. You might go, "You shot me in the foot." It happens. Of course, Michael Imperioli's character was shot in the foot
yeah,
by Joe Pesci's character and then killed. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
Spider. It
Spider,
happens.
yeah, yeah. No, and yeah, that's the thing. I forgot about Michael Imperioli is in it as well in both movies, in both works.
Hmm.
It's I find that very. I always found that very strange in watching The Sopranos, and it always kind of pulled me out of The Sopranos a little bit. It always felt like, I really like Boardwalk Empire. I never felt that Boardwalk Empire was trying too hard to be the Untouchables, for example, or something to that effect. I did feel at times with The Sopranos that it was trying very hard to be what Martin Scorsese would do. To do what Scorsese would do with if he was making a gangster TV show
with that material.
And it felt like it was trying a little too hard on that. And I was curious to see, when I saw Ray Liotta was in this, I was wondering, like, are we going to get some of that those quirks that David Chase tends to bring to his work? Were we going to get that? And the minute you described The Saint, I'm like, yeah, of course. So the relationship, let's talk about the relationship between Dickie and Tony, because this ultimately is, I think, for me, it's the thing that people want to see in this movie. I think when you look at the trailer for this movie, this is pitched. The pitch of this movie is, let's see how Tony Soprano became a gangster. All right. It's not what we get in the movie, but if you look at the trailer, you will see that it shows Tony as good kid in school. Mother doesn't believe in him. Surrounded by bad people. Go on, steal the speakers. It's fine. Just convince yourself not to do it next time. But you'll do it next time. And then we see him then, stealing the ice cream truck in the trailer. We see him doing things. We see him beating up a guy outside a phone booth. But when you watch the movie, then you realize actually the stealing the ice cream truck happens at pretty much at the beginning of Act 2. It's just him having fun with his friends. There's nothing actually. It's not a sinister thing. It's not like he's suddenly he's on the road to becoming evil or anything like that. It's just he's just a messer. He's just causing trouble in the neighborhood. He's just doing it worse than most kids might do. And then the scene of him beating up a guy outside a phone booth isn't some stranger who insulted him. It's his buddy that he kind of, in a weird way, feels he has permission to beat up because his friend can beat him up as well later on. And, that kind of, it's like there's kind of a different code of conduct, among friends. And I'm wondering, it is a very misrepresented film. In what you are presented with in the marketing, the man who made Tony Soprano, all that stuff, right? We're not telling you the name of the man. We're going to tell you the name of the guy he's affected. We're showing you a good deal of that trailer it's Michael Gandolfini. And even casting James Gandolfini's son in that role is a very clear statement. We are honoring this character. Now, do we get that in the film?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think that for the amount of screen time that we see Dickie Moltisanti and Tony Soprano on screen, we don't get to see. I think it would have been better marketed as why Tony Soprano became Tony Soprano, which was the killing of his favorite uncle. That might have been a more interesting movie, But the man who made Tony Soprano, you say, okay, they don't mention his name, but we didn't see the relationship between them. We didn't see, we saw maybe 6 moments, and 3 of those moments, perhaps 2. I'll caveat that by saying the moments between Michael Gandolfini, the Michael Gandolfini version, rather than the younger child we see at the beginning of the movie. We might see them maybe, let's say 8 times is a lot we see them on screen. And 3 of those times, he's pushing him away from the life. He's pushing him away from him. So I didn't feel that, as you said, the marketing and the way it was sold paid off to me.
You made a really good. You mentioned something there. Is the man who made Tony Soprano? That word "made" is a very loaded word in the world of The Sopranos, the world of Goodfellas, the world of Godfather, all that stuff. Made means you are part of the inner circle. You are untouchable. You cannot be. You cannot be messed with. It means they've opened the books on you, and they're happy to you're safe. You're protected. It's why Ray Liotta is in prison in that movie, because he killed a made man. It's why Robert De Niro can never be a made man in Goodfellas, because he is of Irish descent. and they explain it very well in Goodfellas, actually, what that all means. But again, there was a part of me, I was thinking, like, by the end of this movie, I'm expecting to see Tony Soprano, at the very least, even if he's too young to be made, but to be
At a ceremony.
or to be inducted, or maybe to be at the ceremony of a made man, and to, for people to be looking at him next in some weird,
Yeah.
almost like we're seeing
Well,
it through his eyes, a kind of almost like a fantasy setting where everybody's looking at him now as if he's going to be the next made man, or something. It never gets even close to that.
no, I felt that, and of course, this is just my interpretation. I'm sure there's others out there who believe that this is completely there in the movie, and we're just not smart enough to see it. But I do feel that at the very least, he should have been involved in one job with him. So he was brought along as a wheelman. He's brought along as a lookout. He had some involvement in Dickie Moltisanti's other family, as opposed to just knowing him as Uncle Dickie and kind of half knowing what his family was.
You know what I was thinking? So I was thinking, once I saw just Jessipina was having the affair with Harold, I thought there's going to be a hit on Jessipina ordered by Dickie, and Tony will tag along for the ride, or he will get his hands bloody, or he will witness it, and he'll be complicit, right? I mean, if there's a great kind of when I was doing my PhD, I was doing a lot of analysis of Psycho, and there was this great kind of analysis of the peephole scene in Psycho, where he's watching the woman getting undressed and getting ready to go into the shower before that famous scene. And the whole idea was Hitchcock is making us complicit, and now we're stuck with Norman Bates, whether we like it or not, because we looked through the peephole as well, right? And I thought you could have done something really interesting there, where the audience, situated, handcuffed to Tony Soprano, we're all now complicit in Jessipina's murder, and we're all going down that rabbit hole together now. There's no coming back from it. There's no getting out of it. You've got to learn to live with it. You got to learn to go to sleep at night again. You've got to learn to be able to, put on that straight face that when you talk to your friends at school the next day. Like, this is a guy who, like, maybe the way he killed Christopher, he's able to do that because he did the same thing to Jessipina way back, or something, or just some character. But Jessipina feels like a logical, like, it makes what's her role? She's the sacrificial lamb for Tony to rise up. We've brought in this person from afar. She's going to be killed cruelly, so that Tony can rise up. And now we as an audience we've all been blackened. Our souls have been blackened because of that. There was a great opportunity for them to do something like that, but it just felt like the marketing team had a different agenda. And this is me defending David Chase, assuming David Chase had a different agenda with this movie, a different idea of what this movie should be. I think the marketing team stabbed him in the back and turned it into a Tony Soprano origin story.
Well, didn't David Chase always say he didn't want to revisit The Sopranos in any way? He was done with the series. That was it.
I've heard that so many times from every person I've ever, whether it's Hideo Kojima, the game designer, whether it's George Lucas or whatever, I mean, everybody always says I'm done until they're not done.
What I'm saying is, did he approach them with this Dick Moltisanti story, excluding The Sopranos, and they say, well, if you get The Sopranos in there, maybe. What was his intention to have this as you clearly don't believe it was, to have The Sopranos as to the forefront of this story as they were made?
I'm so glad you mentioned this, because this is my theory, right? And this is tied into how I was viewing this film. I told you how when I was watching the trailer for this film, I thought, wow, this is a TV show. Oh no, it's not. It's a movie. Okay, fine. It could be a cool movie, but I'd like it to be a TV show. And then I'm watching the first act of that movie, and everything right up until the death of now that great cinematic opening of the gravestones and all that aside, the whole first act for me felt like I was watching a great HBO pilot episode. And I thought, I love the world I'm in. I love the setting. I really feel like they've transported me back in time. I feel like I'm watching a mix of American Gangster meets Goodfellas meets whatever. And I'm in with these characters. I want to see more of Dickie Moltisanti. I like his relationship with Tony. I love Livia, everybody, Josephina, everybody. I just thought everybody was great. And I thought when he burns the body, when he disposes of the body of Ray Liotta in the warehouse of his father, I thought I could imagine right now like a close-up shot of him watching the flames and the flames in his eyes, very very televisual kind of HBO type shot. I could imagine him running back to the car, driving off, and the camera panning up, and we see the smoke from the burning building, but then we see the smoke in the distance from the riots, and the credits start rolling. Cue up some music, and and I thought, end of pilot, best pilot ever. And the first act for me feels like a pilot episode. The second act feels like it's a movie, but it doesn't feel like a totally complete movie because of issues we've just spoken about. But the third act felt like the season finale of a season of The Many Saints of Newark, and I felt like I was getting half a TV show, half a movie. And my theory is that David Chase had a pitch for a prequel series that was called The Many Saints of Newark. Many saints referring to Moltisanti, but also referring to just other characters. Like, ironically, these people are far from saints. We're showing you a bunch of different characters in this world at this time. I believe that he had a pitch, he had a treatment for a pilot, he had a story arc that involved Tony probably having to come to terms with Dickie's death in season 2. And by season 3, he's probably, like, end of season 2, he'll probably have done something bad, but we're not there yet. And what we got instead was, let's cram all that into a movie and let's rush through the series in one movie. That is my theory on what this movie and how this was written, how this came to be. He had a great pitch for a TV series and he rewrote it as one movie. And that's why there are parts of it that feel very much like they'd be right at home in a television show. Or that this, the ending for me felt like a very weird ending for a movie, but it felt like a great ending for a TV series,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my ramble on that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because when I was watching it, bar the opening shot of the crane and the dolly, it was television. It was television. It didn't feel like a movie once to me. It felt like I was watching. Now, it was directed by a Sopranos director, so maybe that had something to do with it. But it didn't come across to me as a cinematic piece of work. It came across as a TV series, a TV show, like you said. Even as you say, the end shot is a hook to come back next week. What's he going to do? He's made a pinky promise to this guy. I want to see what he's going to do. Is that leaving it open for a sequel? Perhaps. Now, there is talks of a sequel being made years later. But it felt like I wanted to watch the next episode. I don't want to be waiting for a new movie. I want to watch the next episode. And is that because we are conditioned to have seen The Sopranos as a series rather than a standalone movie? There might be some element to that there too.
I think I could accept the first 2 acts of this as a movie. I was thinking I'm watching a great pilot, but I also know I'm not watching a TV show. I'm watching a movie, and I can rationalize and square all that. The third act for me is very much, this is the season. This is the second half of the finale, the final episode of season 1. of the many saints of Newark. That's what this felt like to me. And I think, I always say the third act is what will ultimately, I mean, my whole kind of hot take on, the third act of a movie or whatever is, this is the thing that's going to make people want to recommend the movie. You can have a boring second act, you can have a drawn out first act, but if your third act is so good, the audience leaves with a smile, feeling like they had a satisfying meal. And they will recommend to other people later on, because they'll want to be able to share that great experience with other people. They'll want to gift you that great experience that you're going to then have. I genuinely think the third act of this film would have been masterful if it was a season finale of a show. As a movie, it is very rushed and off-putting.
The pace of the whole piece seemed rushed. And as we said earlier, it seemed like they had so many blocks to fit into certain places that they were just put in there and slowed the pace right down the movie in places. There was stuff that very easily would have worked in a TV show when you had the time to spread something out. But in this movie, it just felt expositional. We have to see this because it makes sense here. Yeah, and it didn't quite grab me as a great piece of cinema. But like you say, if it was a TV show and we had the chance to explore this, as we said, there was a moment where we just happened to cut into Harold and Josephina in bed. There was no preamble to this besides some longing looks over a crowded nightclub. We didn't, and this all happened after she had an argument with Dickie. As I said earlier, if you imagine the casino scene where you've got Joe Pesci's character and Sharon Stone's character, where they have their affair, it's through a mutual hatred of Robert De Niro's Ace Rothstein, where they could, if they had that moment, it might have felt like a more natural progression to truth rather than using it as a plot device.
Also,
to make Dickie have revenge on Harold.
We've talked about The Irishman as being a movie that, we like, there are parts of The Irishman that we really like, but we've both acknowledged that the running time is really, 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 really excessive. I think this is this film could have been much longer, and I think it would have been understandably longer, because this is a Sopranos story. This is a huge epic story as it is, in terms of the story of Tony Soprano. It's 6-7 seasons, however long it is. This is a story in the mind of many people that went on for years. They have years of their life dedicated to this show. If you're going to give us an event like this, because this, for a lot of people, this is a movie event. It wasn't marketed as a movie event. It wasn't probably received as a movie event. But for a lot of people, this was an important film. I imagine for you, you're probably like eager to watch this film. 3 hours wouldn't have been, or 2.5 hours, 2 hours 45 minutes wouldn't have been unreasonable. And I'm somebody who will never say that, but I would have been able to say, I understand why you want it. That if they ever do a Game of Thrones movie or something, it'll be like 3 hours. It'll be like a Lord of the Rings movie, right?
Yeah.
It almost feels like David Chase didn't have the confidence, or didn't have faith, or forgot how important this show is to people. And again, and rather than rushing, he could have actually been like, maybe this comes back to him being a television director and wanting to kind of, keep things within an appropriate frame. I don't know.
No, again, it comes back to the point, did he really want to do this?
Yeah.
Was the offer just too good to turn down in terms of financial or recognition, but whatever? Was this film in its incarnation needed at this time? I've read where he walked away from them, and the original project was meant to be, or the original prequel to Sopranos was meant to be about Johnny Boy, about his father, rather than about the uncle.
Yeah, I remember that.
That might have been a more, it might have been the man who made Tony. Imagine if it was called The Woman Who Made Tony Soprano, and it was about his relationship with his mother and the father. That would have been, for me, a stronger movie because the first 2 seasons are him fighting with his mother. As much as fighting with rival families, it's fighting with his own family, and his mother tries to have him whacked in the end of the first season, or is complicit and trying to have him killed in the first season. So I mean, the woman who made Tony Soprano, because we have those lovely moments with himself
Mm.
and Olivia where she says, "I've got to go on tablets, but I'm not going to," which is a nice little foreshadowing to what he has to do because of his depression and
Yeah, yeah.
his thing. Uh, um, that that you know, and he's supporting her to do it. So if there was a moment in it where the teacher was telling Olivia about a memory, Olivia, a memory that that Tony had about her reading him a book and they cuddling up close in bed. And again, paraphrasing, I think it's something like they snuggled up or they got the moment meant more to Tony than what it ever did to Olivia. And there's this moment where Olivia recognizes and remembers that, but as soon as she recognizes it, it's almost like she dismisses it again. That her son
Mm. Yeah.
isn't good enough, for lack of a better word. Um, and I think that kind of movie might have been a
Well,
stronger Sopranos movie rather than the Many Saints of Newark.
it's interesting because when June came out, one of the really June, the recent film, came out. One of the big kind of talking points was this idea of how great it was to see a story about a mother and son on a journey together, and the son being, or the mother being the kind of the wise sage teacher in the relationship, and not just being the uncle or the father or the um or the male kind of a
Yeah, yeah.
influence. And it was yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, actually, because I think that could have been a really, or could still be a really
Mm,
interesting direction to take the show, a greater connection to his mother that ultimately could fall apart later on,
yeah.
or could ultimately, emphasize the tragedy even more in the show. We're gonna have to wrap it up, but where do you realistically see this going? Because I don't think this ending meant much to audience. I've been looking at reviews, I've been looking at what people have been saying online, and it feels like, as you say, I want the next episode.
Yeah.
Are we going to get the next episode, do you think?
Was it satisfying for me? No. Was it an ending of The Sopranos legend? No. Will there be another incarnation or another chapter? I think there will, but don't know if it'll take a long form in terms of a
Mm,
series format. I think it might be another 2.5, 3 hour movie to explore
mm,
it more. There is already talks. I've been reading in places that they're looking at another a sequel to this and prequel to the series where we see Tony Soprano much older with his own crew now with and making his way in the world with Pussy and Polly and Silvio and Jackie April and these kind of people that we know from the series as well. And just I think they're going to stage it. If the reports I've read is he's just become a father to Meadow for the first time, and then he still has the life and that kind of thing. Um, but I don't think this is the last we'll see of the Sopranos characters. But I think that it won't be the Many Saints of Newark too. I think it'll or the
mm.
Many Saints of Newark too. It'll be a new incarnation
Yeah,
of the Sopranos.
yeah. I think, yeah. I don't really have an answer myself for it, but I think what you pitched me there a while ago, the woman that made Tony Soprano, I think that would be something that I think audiences would really relish, actually, and would be
Well,
very, very refreshing and very, I think, in keeping with the direction a lot of stories are now moving in, and kind of moving away
well,
from the old cliches.
there's so much material there drawing on the canon of the series where I mean the years that Johnny was in prison, you know what
Mm,
I mean, and it was just the two of them and Janice and the younger daughter who's never mentioned very much but is always kind of there, whose name I can't even recall. You know, she's the younger daughter to or the younger sister to Tony and Janice. I can never recall her name because I think she's got 4 scenes in the whole arc. um but if David Chase is listening and wants to discuss my ideas about the woman who made Tony Soprano, I'm waiting to talk to him. It'd be great. um But yeah, so look, my overall take on the Many Saints of Newark is I enjoyed it, but it didn't satisfy me as a Sopranos fan.
I think it satisfied me as a fan of gangster movies. I don't think it made me want to go back and watch The Sopranos TV show again. Like, it didn't recontextualize anything in a significant way for me to say, oh, wow, now I'm going to watch this with a new set of lenses. I think it was just, I felt like, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this movie. I definitely think I'll watch it again. But I think, yeah, that's about it, really, with it. But I do think there's a lot we can take away from it as in terms of filmmaking and screenwriting and things like that as well. And I think we've covered a lot of those points. So look, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much, Oisin. Guys, if you want to get more of these videos, do make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Just search for The Script Department. You can also find us on social media, and the link's in the description. And don't forget to check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net. Thanks for listening.